You're the reason your father died with a broken heart. You've always been a disgrace." My mother's voice cut through the silence like a knife. The room froze. Even the clinking of dishes in the kitchen seemed to stop as her words echoed off the walls of the living room. A few relatives who lingered after the funeral turned their heads away in awkward unison, pretending not to hear. But I heard. Every syllable embedded itself like shrapnel. I shouldn't have come back. That thought hit me first. But then I remembered the last time I spoke to my father. His voice had been weak, breath thin and uneven, but he'd said one thing clearly. "You always come through, Natalie." It wasn't much, but it was more than I had gotten in years. Now, standing in the same house I had helped keep standing financially for over a decade, my mother looked at me like I was the termite. I caught a glimpse of Brandon across the room, leaning against the doorway with his arms folded. He didn't flinch at our mother's outburst. He looked almost amused. I clenched my jaw, staring at the wall behind her. A large photo of Brandon at his high school graduation took center stage, cap askew, holding a football helmet under one arm, grinning like the prince of the house. No photos of me on the shelf. Mine must have quietly disappeared over the years. I turned without a word and headed upstairs. My old room had been stripped of everything except a guest bed and mismatched sheets. It smelled like mothballs and furniture polish. I dropped my bag by the door and sat on the edge of the bed, willing myself not to cry. It wasn't grief I felt. It was something hotter, something older. Humiliation with a long memory. They hadn't just left me out of the family narrative. They'd redrafted it entirely. Downstairs, I could hear Brandon's voice rising, laughing too loud about some story from Dad's college days. I closed the door gently, then pulled my laptop from my bag. I didn't know what I was looking for yet. Maybe tax records, old estate papers, anything that might help me understand what kind of web I had walked back into. After a few clicks and searches, I opened my encrypted drive. Dozens of folders. Copies of receipts, wiring transfers I'd made to help Mom with the new roof, the car repairs, the surgery. I'd kept them not out of suspicion, but because it was just how I worked. Organized, responsible, invisible. They used to praise me for it. Quietly, grudgingly. Then gradually they stopped saying anything at all. I stared at the screen, my cursor blinking next to a folder titled Cross Family Support. Over the years, I had transferred nearly $90,000 to my parents. Brandon had never repaid a dime to anyone, but he got the parties, the praise, the place on the mantle. I scrolled further down, clicking open an archived email my dad had sent me in 2017. Short, businesslike. "Thanks again for helping with the mortgage catch-up. You've saved the house more than once." No flowery words, but he'd acknowledged me then. I shut the laptop softly. That night, dinner passed with brittle small talk. Brandon's girlfriend Claire talked about houseplants. My mother nodded politely, as if the outburst earlier had never happened. But every now and then, I'd catch her eyes flick toward me with something unreadable in them. Defiance? Guilt? Regret? Hard to tell. When I stood to clear the plates, she waved me off. "You're a guest," she said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Number I wasn't a guest. I was a stranger, and maybe I always had been. Later, after everyone had gone to sleep, I tiptoed downstairs. I walked into the den, Dad's old office, and turned on the lamp. The desk had been reorganized, papers moved. A faint dust line outlined where a photo frame used to sit. I opened the bottom drawer. Still locked. Back in my room, I stared at the ceiling for hours. A voice in my head whispered what I didn't want to admit. I was here to say goodbye. But not just to my father. Natalie sits alone in the guest bedroom that night. Her fingers tremble as she opens her laptop and types into the search bar. Cross Family Trust, Legal Revision 2020. To my son, Brandon Cross, I leave all assets, properties, and holdings. And to my daughter? Silence. There was no and. The words landed like a dull hammer, blunt and unreal. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. My ears rang as if the room had suddenly gone underwater, but I hadn't missed anything. The sentence had ended. That was it. I sat in the oak-paneled conference room of Hanley and Fields, hands folded so tightly in my lap they'd turned white. Across the polished table, my mother stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a line. Brandon leaned back, one ankle propped casually on his knee, wearing an expensive jacket that still had the store tag loosely tucked under his sleeve. He didn't seem surprised at all. Mr. Hanley cleared his throat and shuffled the remaining pages of the will like they might rearrange themselves into something more palatable. But the rest was standard legalese. Execution clauses, notary stamps, nothing else for me. I opened my mouth. There must be no mistake, my mother cut in. Her voice was calm, almost bored. Your father and I discussed it thoroughly. I turned to her, heart pounding. But why? After everything, you left us, she said coolly. You chose your career. Your brother stayed. Brandon chimed in as if on cue. It's not about money, Nat. Dad just knew I'd honor the family legacy. A wave of heat crawled up my neck. Legacy? He had barely held a job longer than 6 months. I'd been the one keeping this house afloat with wire transfers, checks, emergency phone calls from 1,000 miles away. Mr. Hanley closed the folder with a quiet finality. That concludes the reading of the will, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. The room emptied quickly. Brandon lingered to shake hands and make idle jokes with the paralegal. My mother left without a word. I stood slowly, as if my body weighed twice what it had an hour ago. At the elevator, a hand touched mine gently. I turned to see Maggie Owens, my father's longtime friend and our neighbor since childhood. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she gave me a long look, soft but concerned. I was there when he drafted a different version, she said in a near whisper. My breath caught. When? 2017. He showed it to me. It wasn't this. She looked toward the now empty hallway. You were in it then, equally. I nodded, barely. Thank you. That night, back at the house, the silence was suffocating. Dinner was ordered in, some greasy takeout Brandon insisted on. And we ate in front of the TV like it was any other Thursday night, not the day my parents had legally erased me. I excused myself early and retreated to the guest room. My hands moved before I fully knew what I was doing. I booted up the laptop again, navigated to my encrypted cloud archive. A folder labeled Dad Estate Docs. I had saved everything back in 2017 when he emailed me forms to review a family trust structure. One file blinked at me like a beacon. Draft will. 2017.pdf. I opened it. My name was there. Clearly. Half of everything, including the house and the retirement accounts. A note in the margins? Make sure Natalie understands investment clause. She'll handle that better than Brandon. My throat tightened. A lifetime of being the responsible one, of being told to wait my turn, of being good, documented, quantified, and then discarded. The will they read today had been signed in June 2020, 2 weeks after my father's second hospitalization. He had been recovering from a stroke then. He could barely hold a pen. Down the hall, I could hear Brandon's voice rising with laughter again. Something about crypto. Probably another scam that would tank within months. I closed the file, then opened a new email to myself. I attached the 2017 will, just in case. Natalie opens her encrypted cloud folder that night. A document she had scanned years ago. Draft will 2017.pdf reappears. You inherited the house, Brandon, I said flatly. You also inherited the $450,000 mortgage and 3 maxed-out credit cards. He blinked at me like I was speaking a different language. We stood in the kitchen of the Cross family home, surrounded by the remnants of a life built on illusion. Stacks of unopened bills, curling notices from the bank, and a silence from our mother that pressed into every crevice of the room. You're kidding, right? Brandon scoffed. Dad paid off the house years ago. No, I said, sliding the folder across the table toward him. They refinanced in 2020, took out a new mortgage. It's all here. He didn't reach for the papers. Instead, he turned to our mother, who sat at the far end of the table, her fingers wrapped tightly around a mug of now-cold tea. "Mom," he said, voice rising. "What is she talking about?" Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't look up. "We needed the money," she murmured. "Your business, the restaurant idea. It seemed worth it." I stared at her. "So you put the house on the line, again, after it was almost paid off? And then left it to Brandon without telling him the truth?" Her eyes met mine finally, hollow and tired. "It wasn't supposed to matter. We thought he'd recover. It was just bad timing." "Bad timing?" I laughed, not because anything was funny, but because if I didn't, I might scream. "There are 3 credit cards in Dad's name. One over the limit. A personal loan from Uncle Paul. And guess what? You've been draining the retirement funds for years. All for him." Brandon turned red, fists clenched at his sides. "You act like you're better than me." "I don't have to act," I snapped. His girlfriend Claire, who had been quietly picking at her fingernails in the corner, suddenly spoke. "Maybe you should tell them everything, Brandon." He glared at her. "Claire, don't." But she stood her ground. "He didn't just borrow for the business. He gambled it, most of it." "What?" My voice cracked. Claire nodded, her face pale. "He owes people. He's been trying to transfer the house into my name to protect it. Said it was just in case. But I didn't know it was this bad." My mother made a strangled sound. "Is that true?" Brandon didn't answer. He just stormed out of the kitchen. I sat down hard in the chair across from her. "You signed papers, didn't you? Letting him move assets? Did you even read them?" She covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head slowly. "He said it was temporary." I didn't know what burned more, the betrayal or the sheer incompetence. Later that night, while they slept, I returned to Dad's office. I had avoided the space since he passed, but something pulled me there now. The lamp cast a soft amber light over the desk, illuminating dust-lined outlines of missing objects. I opened the file drawer again, the one he always kept locked. To my surprise, the lock gave way with a soft click. Inside, folders stacked neatly. I rifled through them until I found a manila envelope tucked behind the tax binders. It was thick. I pulled it out and opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten will, dated March 2017, signed in his precise handwriting, initialed on every page, notarized. My name was there. Clearly, deliberately. Equal share. Mentions of my business acumen. Wishes that I help Mom manage the portfolio. Not a single note about Brandon's potential. Just facts. Just truth. I pressed the pages against my chest and exhaled for the first time in days. Ethan texted, "If that document's valid, you may have grounds for contesting the entire estate." Natalie whispers, "Let's see who the real Disgrace is." "You can destroy that paper," my mother hissed, "but you'll destroy this family with it." The envelope lay between us like a loaded weapon. We stood in my Boston apartment's kitchen, sunlight pouring through the windows, unbothered by the storm brewing inside. She had shown up unannounced, like she used to when I was in college, usually when bills were due or guilt needed to be weaponized. Now, it wasn't guilt she was swinging. It was desperation. I didn't flinch. I folded the paper slowly and slid it back into its sleeve. "I'm not here to destroy anyone, but you don't get to pretend this didn't happen." She crossed her arms. "Your father was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly in 2017. He was lucid enough to get it notarized. And Maggie remembers him writing it." Her lips trembled, but her voice sharpened. "He changed his mind. You changed. You left." "I didn't leave," I said quietly. "I just stopped bleeding for people who called me a burden for having boundaries." Her breath hitched, but she turned away, feigning indignation. I poured tea for us both, set hers down. "You should read this," I said, pushing forward a typed summary from Lena Ford, the estate attorney Ethan connected me with. It outlines your legal exposure in the event Brandon defaults on the mortgage, which he will. You'd let me lose the house? She asked, genuinely stunned. I held her gaze. You let me lose my place in this family years ago. We sat in brittle silence. She skimmed the document. I saw her fingers falter at the mention of Brandon's unauthorized transfers. She looked older than I remembered. Smaller. He told me it was temporary, that he just needed time, she said, voice nearly a whisper. Time's up, I said, but softer now. The next day, I met Maggie at the notary office. She signed an affidavit confirming the 2017 will was legitimate, witnessed, and represented Thomas Cross's intentions. Ms. Ford reviewed everything and nodded. Legally valid if proven he wasn't under undue influence later. It was a real option. Contesting the estate, going to court, watching Brandon unravel under cross-examination, watching my mother squirm on the witness stand. But as I walked home in the bitter December wind, something inside me shifted. I didn't want their house. I didn't want their money. I wanted my life back. That night, I opened a new folder on my computer, titled it Contingency, uploaded the will, the affidavit, all documentation, password protected, shared it with my attorney. Done. My mother called the next day, voice hollow. I'm going to look at apartments, she said. Something smaller. I'll help you find options, I said, but I won't be paying deposits or co-signing anything. Pause. Understood. I exhaled. Later, she sent me a photo of a modest senior housing complex with a garden and book club. No strings, no pleas. Just thoughts? Maybe something was breaking. Maybe something was beginning. That night, Natalie deletes the draft message to the court, but saves every document in a new folder labeled Contingency. You're just going to walk away? Brandon spat. After all you took from this family? His voice echoed through the hallway of the nearly empty Cross family home. Boxes lined the walls, sagging with age and dust. I didn't answer right away. I was staring at the dent in the wooden floor by the staircase, the one I made as a teenager when I tripped carrying groceries and no one noticed. Now, Brandon stood in front of me, red-faced and vibrating with indignation. The man who inherited everything. The man who squandered it all before he even understood what he'd signed for. I didn't take anything, I said evenly. I gave. For years, you just never paid attention. He scoffed. You think you're better than me. Number I just stopped pretending you were my responsibility. In the kitchen, our mother was silently wrapping dishware in newspaper. She didn't intervene. She'd stopped defending him a few weeks ago. Ever since Claire moved out and Brandon confessed to owing tens of thousands to 2 different gambling sites. Ever since the final foreclosure notice arrived, naming his full legal name as primary borrower. You're abandoning Mom, he snarled, voice sharper now. She's going to lose everything. I walked over and placed a printed list on the kitchen counter. Senior housing options, sliding scale, social support groups, all vetted. She picked the one she liked. Brandon glanced at the page, then crumpled it without reading. You just walk away from all of it? The name, the house, the lies? I said, louder than intended. Yes. He opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. Do you know what I remember most about this house? Not birthdays or holidays. I remember the silence, the way you got away with everything, the way I paid bills and got accused of abandoning the family because I didn't show up with gift cards and drama. He shook his head in disbelief. You're cold. Number, I'm done. I turned toward the living room. The photo albums were spread across the coffee table, some already boxed, others still open. I picked up one and flipped through. Brandon in Little League, Brandon at prom, Brandon asleep on the couch after Thanksgiving dinner. It was like watching my own family through glass. Always close, never truly inside. I found a photo from my graduation tucked in the back. Creased, almost an afterthought. I held it for a moment, then placed it gently in a labeled envelope and tucked it into my coat pocket. As I moved toward the door, Brandon followed. "This house is part of Dad's legacy," he snapped. "You don't just get to erase it." I turned. "Number, but I don't have to carry it either." He looked like he wanted to say more. Something cruel, something self-pitying. But the words never came. Just an empty stare. That night, I helped our mother move into a small but clean apartment 2 towns over. She didn't cry, didn't plead, just sat across from me and signed the lease, hands trembling only slightly. Later, while unpacking, she handed me a box. "Your father kept these in his closet," she said quietly. Inside, my childhood journals, academic trophies, a birthday card I wrote him at age 12. All saved, all hidden. I looked at her. "I didn't know he still had them," she whispered. That evening, as we drank weak tea in her new kitchenette, she spoke again, carefully, almost like confessing to a priest. "I never realized how he speaks to you. Has it always been this way?" Natalie simply nods. For the first time, I walked through that house without guilt, only clarity. The living room looked smaller without furniture. Echoes replaced voices. The air was heavy with dust and something older, disappointment that had never been aired out. I ran my fingers along the grooves of the doorframe, the one where my height was marked in pencil until age 12. My name was still faintly there, barely legible beneath a layer of paint. Brandon hadn't come today. The bank had given until noon for final access before the house was formally repossessed. Our mother stood beside me at the threshold, holding a scarf to her face as if trying to block the scent of endings. We moved through each room in silence, packing the last things. An old teapot, a box of tangled Christmas lights, a cracked mirror she insisted on keeping. I let her take whatever she wanted. None of it mattered to me anymore. In what used to be my bedroom, now half storage, half forgotten, I found a single object left behind. A photo. Me and Dad. Graduation day. He looked tired but proud. I remembered him squeezing my shoulder just after the photo was taken and saying, "You're already further than I ever was." I left the picture on the kitchen counter in a clean frame. One last offering. One last truth. Outside, the wind was cold but steady. We stood on the sidewalk and watched a silver sedan pull up, an auctioneer, clipboard in hand, ready to take inventory. My mother looked down at her gloves. "I thought we were doing the right thing," she said. "Always helping Brandon, always expecting you to be fine. But we weren't protecting him. We were just avoiding the truth." I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to fix, only things to let go of. We drove in silence to her new apartment. It was modest, fresh beige carpet, clean windows, a cheerful receptionist who greeted her by name. She moved slowly, but with more determination than I'd seen in years. As I helped her unpack, she opened a worn envelope and handed it to me. "I started writing this after we met at your place. I wasn't sure I'd ever give it to you." I unfolded the letter. "I punished you for surviving without us. That was my shame, not yours. I can never repay what I allowed, what I ignored. But I hope this is a beginning, not an apology, but an acknowledgement." Tears prickled the corners of my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not today. New Year's Eve came quietly. Ethan and I stayed in, sipping cider and watching snow fall through the window of my apartment in Boston. No calls, no fires to put out, no demands, just peace. I logged into my blog for the first time in months. The cursor blinked expectantly. I typed, "Sometimes the real inheritance isn't land or legacy. It's letting go of the people who told you you weren't enough." I hit publish. Natalie uploads a blog post. "Sometimes the real inheritance isn't land or legacy. It's letting go of the people who told you you weren't enough." Views and comments pour in. Her victory wasn't loud. It was in every quiet boundary she set, every truth she refused to bury. The house was lost, but so was the illusion that love must be earned through sacrifice. When injustice is met with unwavering clarity, the real inheritance is self-respect. No legacy built on favoritism and silence can survive the reckoning of truth. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe. And comment 1 if you've ever carried a burden you didn't deserve.